Hey everybody, I am Carolyn Byers. I'm the Education Director at Madison Audubon, and today starts week one of summer camp, round two. So we are going to be doing Bird Week again starting today. And Bird Week is my favorite week because I love birds. I love all animals, and I, really enjoy learning about them and their habits and what they eat and what they need. But I'm definitely a bird nerd before anything else. So birds are really special to me, and I'm very excited to share them with all of you. So I'm going to take just a second to head over to the Madison Audubon Facebook page on my computer so that I can read all of the questions that you write. So if you're joining and you're a part of our summer camp, or you're just joining now and you're trying to figure out if you want to be a part of our summer camp, add some comments to this video, and I would love to say hi to you, hear what you're excited about, hear what you're seeing. If you're seeing birds already, just share them with me. I want to know who's here, who's watching. Hi, Sally. It's good to see you. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about summer camp in case you're not totally familiar with it. So there are 4 weeks. We have Bird Week this week. Next week is Mammals. The week after that is Herps, which is short for herpetiles, and those are reptiles and amphibians combined into one epic week. And then our last week is Insects, which is even bigger than Herp Week because there are so many types of insects out there. So this is week one and birds, and you can find all of the information about our lessons and the plan for the week on our website, madisonaudubon.org, and you'll find it at the top under Education in Forces of Nature. Great. We have more people writing in. It's good to see you. And you can find it at the Forces of Nature drop-down page. And there you'll find lessons and activities and links to cool videos and links to other videos that I've done teaching. And it will just sort of lead you through your own awesome week. And so every Monday, I'm going to do a lesson like this kicking off the week. And it'll share a little bit. Oh, somebody asked, what is Herps? Great question. Herps is reptiles and amphibians combined together. It's herptile. So I'm going to do a kickoff video on Monday at 1 o'clock for each week, and it's going to share a little bit about what's going on during the week, what you should be excited about, what I'm excited about, and that's really the only event that you need to tune in for live. And even that you can watch later if you want. It's just fun to do it live with everybody. And then for the whole rest of the week, it's kind of a choose your own adventure. You look at the list of activities that we supplied there and choose what works for you. If you're really excited about one thing, but something else looks pretty boring, don't do it. So we have a Super Explorers Club, and some kids are signed up for that. Oh, hi, Abby and Clementine. It's good to see you. And those Super Explorers are from age 4 all the way up to age 12. So there's a pretty big range there. And so I'm going to be relying on you parents to help make the lessons fit your kids. And I have some advice on how to do that on the Super Explorer, on the camp page. It has a note to parents. And so there's some advice on how to make it harder or easier, or ways to adjust things to make it what your kids want. So basically, if you're having trouble and your kid is bored, send me an email, because maybe we just need to tweak a few things and your kid will be more excited about it. And kids, let your parents know if you're liking it or if you're bored, or whomever you're doing with this with. I suppose you don't have to do it with your parents. Okay, so if you are in the Super Explorers Club, check your email, because you got some information about joining our Flipgrid group, and I'm really excited for you to find that. And finally, please take some photos of what you're doing and share them with us, because I would love to see what kind of adventures you're getting up to, what kind of animals you're finding, what sorts of footprints you're seeing, all of that. So document it. Let me know. You can either add them to the comments in here, or you can send me an email with it, and I'll put my email address in the comments in a little bit. Okay. All sorts of kids are saying hi. It's so good to see you. Thanks everyone for chiming in. Okay, so this is week one. We're doing birds, and birds are awesome. I love birds. They're so amazing. They have feathers. They are beautiful. Some of them look really crazy and ridiculous. And they have wings, which I think are really neat. And there are other animals that have wings for sure. But all birds have wings, even if they can't fly. And I want to show you some feathers too. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a whole lesson on feathers and feather color. So if you want, you can join in for that. But I just chose a few feathers here. This is a primary flight feather from a Canada goose, and it came from the bird's left wing. And you can see that this feather is very asymmetrical. This side, this is called the leading edge of the wing. This is the part that goes into the wind on the front of the wing. This part is really, really small, and this part is much wider, but it also has this cool groove in it. And all of these things help this bird fly the way that it flies. And the fact that it's a primary feather makes it look like this too. And we can get into more of this tomorrow when we talk all about feathers. But this is the body feather of a swan. It was a mute swan. So this is an enormous body feather. Most birds' body feathers, like a sparrow or a chickadee, are about this big. This is huge, but a swan is huge. That's so cool. And it's bright white. And this, I bet you can guess what this is. I'm going to hold this up here. If you have a guess, type it in the comments. Don't second guess yourself. It's exactly what it looks like. This is a big bird, by the way. All right, so birds have feathers. They're all different shapes and colors and sizes, and they help birds fly. It's super neat. There are other things birds have that help them fly. Their wings are not their wings. Their bones are, many of them are hollow, and they have really very intricate structures inside of them to help them be strong, wall hollow. That's great. Hi, Andy. It's good to see you too. And they have air sacs in their bones that help them be lighter. Somebody guessed an owl and a falcon. Those are good guesses, but this is not it. The name of the bird describes this feather a little bit. That's a little hint for you. I'm going to keep holding it up until we get a guess. I'll give you another hint. It's a tail feather. And they have some bones that are fused together. Like a lot of their hips are fused together to make them really strong, because when they're launching into the air and when they're landing again hard, it's a lot of strain on those bones. So by having them fused together, it makes them very strong. So they have so many different adaptations to help them fly. Oh, you know what else is my favorite bird adaptation? They don't have teeth, which makes their skull lighter, because teeth are heavy. So birds don't have teeth. They have beaks that they can use in really cool ways, but no teeth, and that helps them be lighter. Super cool. So let's see, what else do I want to say? They lay eggs. Awesome. They are warm-blooded. I already mentioned their beak. Their beaks are very specialized. All of them use their beaks in pretty different ways, and so you can know a lot about a bird by its beak. All right, somebody suggested that this is a hawk, and you're right. This is a red-tailed hawk feather, a tail feather. And when they have many tail feathers together, it looks a lot less pale. So this does look a little bit pale, but all the feathers together help it be more striking and stand out. It's a red-tailed hawk feather. Really cool feather to find. I suppose I should mention that bird feathers are protected along with their nests, their eggs, their body parts, and the actual birds themselves. So I have a permit to collect feathers because I am an educator and I use these feathers to teach with. So if you do find a feather, it's totally fine to pick it up and look at it and check it out and take pictures and show people you're with. But then you should leave it out in nature. Okay? Awesome. All right, what else do we want to say? Let's talk about birds in the world. Okay, I had to Google this because I didn't know this off the top of my head, but there are between 200 and 400 billion individual birds. So not species, but actual birds in the world alive at any given time. There's so many birds. So when that fact was written, there were about 5 billion people in the world. And I just Googled that again today, and it turns out that the fact I had looked at was old, and there are actually closer to about 7 billion people in the world. And So that means there are about 60 birds for every person in the world. So if it was allowed and if you wanted to, you could have 60 birds. And everyone else could have 60 birds. That's amazing. I don't want 60 birds. I think they should be out in the wild. But that's such a cool fact. Clementine is wondering if you use the feathers as quills and write with them. I do not, but people used to. And that was a really neat tool, a really neat way to use a bird, especially if you had hunted the bird and you had eaten it and you're trying to use all the parts of it, just to be really respectful of the bird and its life. But this is the feather quill right here. And if you make a few little snips down here to just shape the tip of it a little differently, then you can dip it in ink and you can write with it. And I have tried it and it does work. I prefer a pen, but it does work and it's cool. That was a good question, Clementine. All right, so there are so many birds in the world. Now let's talk about species. So there are scientists, they like to argue back and forth about this, how many species of birds there are in the world. And that's because depending on how you define a species, it can be a little bit different. So on average, people think there's about 10,000 species of birds in the world. But because of genetics, we're able to look a little bit closer at the relationships between species, and it actually might be almost double that. So something more like 18,000 species, just because we're learning so much more about them through genetics. And that's amazing too, that we have been studying birds, scientists, for hundreds of years longer. I mean, because we had to study them to be able to hunt them, to eat them back, thousands of years ago. But we have been learning about birds for so long, and there's still so much more that we don't know. I think that's so exciting. You can always keep learning. That's great. All right, so now that we talked about the entire world, let's talk about Wisconsin. So there have been about 400 species of birds sighted by someone standing in Wisconsin. Obviously all over the state, not all in the same place. So 400 species of birds have been seen in Wisconsin, but there's only about 250 of them that are really common here. Either that breed here, which means they build a nest, or that, they come down during the winter and we get to see them pretty regularly. So there's about 250 species of birds that are pretty easy to see. And there's probably about 40 or 50 that are really easy to see just in cities. So you can do so much birding, even if you live in the city or a really busy neighborhood or, a town outside of the city. That's one of my favorite things about birds. They're everywhere and they're noisy and they fly and they're a little bit more visible than a lot of other animals. They're super cool. All right, so the next thing on my list to talk about was why I love birds, but I feel like I've been doing that the whole time anyways. But I just love that they're easy to see. They sing. You can listen to them and identify them by their song. They're beautiful and interesting, and there's so many things to learn about. First, you can start out trying to just observe them and try to figure out what they're doing. You don't even have to learn what their name is, what the name of the bird is. You can just be like, oh, that bird, it's trying to find food. That one over there, it's yelling at its neighbor. But then once you start getting a little more familiar with them, then you can learn how to identify them and learn if they're male or female, or if they're an adult or a juvenile. Then you can start really diving into their behavior and trying to figure out if they're, looking for a mate or trying to build a nest or setting up a territory. You can learn about their evolution and how they migrate and just all sorts of things. Birds are amazing. And my spark bird, I love talking about spark birds. And for people who don't know, a spark bird is a bird that gets you excited to learn more about birds. So often it's like one of the first that you see or the first one that you saw doing something really cool or interesting. So I have two spark birds. My first one is a chickadee. And I know that some people think feeding birds from your hand is okay, and other people don't like it, and I totally respect both points of view, and I think there's right ways to do it and wrong ways to do it. But when I was a kid, my dad used to take me to this park where the birds would know that if you held your hand up like this with food in it, they could fly to your hand like it was a bird feeder, and they would eat birdseed right out of your hand. And for me as a kid, that was as close to magic as I could get. It was just amazing seeing a bird flying around in a tree and then just decide to come and land on my hand for a little bit of bird seed. So that made me so happy and just so excited to learn about nature. And so the chickadee has always been one of my favorite birds, and it's definitely a spark bird for me. And then when I was starting to become a scientist, I took a class that taught me how to band birds, which is when scientists capture a bird using a net usually, and the bird isn't hurt. They just hold it for, 3, 5, 10 minutes, depending on what they're trying to do. They take some measurements, and then they put a little metal bracelet on the bird's leg. And that bracelet has a number on it so that if another scientist catches it, they can learn about the bird. And the first bird I ever got to hold as a scientist was a gray catbird. And that's also one that you can see in neighborhoods. It's really common. They're a gray bird and they have a black cap on their head. And it looks like they're wearing rusty underpants. So they have sort of a brick color on their underside. And they sound like a cat. So they're a mimic. They copy lots of other birds. But then they'll also throw in their own meows. And they go, they're really grumpy. Or they sound grumpy. That's anthropomorphizing, of course. I'm putting my human emotions on a bird, but they sound grumpy and I just love hearing them. So those are my 2 spark birds. If anyone else has spark birds and they want to comment on, add in the comments what their spark bird is, I would love to hear it. So I'm going to check the comments right now. Let's see. Elliot and Lily thought they saw a pelican up in a dead tree off the lake. Are there pelicans in Wisconsin? Yes, there are. So they're not all over the place though. And I actually, I went on a little road trip this weekend and I saw 3 different flocks of them flying, and there were about 7 of them in each group. And it was really neat because they're huge birds with really white wings, but they have big big patches of black in the wings. And they sort of teeter on the thermals, and it looks like they twinkle or they go invisible for a second, and then you can see them again depending on how the light's hitting them. So pelicans are a really special bird for me to see because they are not super common, but they're really cool and really big and fun. So yeah, I think you could have seen a pelican for sure. I don't know how often they sit in dead trees though. I'll have to look that up. That's a pretty cool sighting. Let's see. Lily's sparkbird is a hummingbird. Awesome. And someone says that they heard a catbird. That's great. Try to look around in trees next time you see it. They like low trees or big bushes, which are pretty easy to find in a neighborhood. Someone else says their sparkbird is a chickadee and a hummingbird. Jim says his sparkbird is a pelican. Awesome. Good sparkbirds, everyone. Not that there's a bad one, as long as it gets you excited about learning about birds. Go sparkbirds. All right, so let's talk about lessons for this week. And if you have more questions or sparkbirds, type them in. I would love to share them. Oh, Ria's sparkbird's a bald eagle. Very cool. That's a neat sparkbird. I remember the first time I saw a bald eagle. It was way back before I knew much about birds, and I thought they were pretty rare still. And my dad was learning about birds too. And I grew up in Buffalo, so we were on the Niagara River, and we were looking through a spotting scope, and we were just kind of scanning around, and my dad looks in it and says, "Oh, wow, here, you look in the spotting scope. Come tell me what you see." And I peek in and I go, "I know what I think it is, but I don't want to say it." And my dad looked at me and said, "Well, I'm not going to say it." So we said it on 3 because we both were nervous to identify it because it seemed so rare. So it was pretty cool having that moment with my dad. The bald eagles are really fun. Nisa, I might be saying your name wrong, says, where can we spot owls? We don't see them in the city. That's a good question. So there are definitely barred owls and great horned owls that live around Madison. Great horned owls are what you're more likely to see in neighborhoods. So for example, I know of about 3 great horned owl nests that are in Middleton or the west side of Madison. And they're just in big trees in neighborhoods, like in someone's backyard. There's also some great horned owl nests at Pheasant Branch and at the Arboretum. So those are really big, large chunks of land where great horned owls like to be. You can also find barred owls at the Arboretum and Picnic Point and Pheasant Branch for sure. And really, barred owls are quite chatty. And so the best way, I think, to find owls is to listen to their calls so you can identify them. And then when you go out, I like to look for, they look kind of like footballs. They sit very tall in the tree. And they often sit kind of close to the trunk and not quite at the top of a tree, unless they're hunting and they need a good spot to look. So you can look for them during the day. And then I definitely look for the footballs. But on early winter nights, like December and January, right as dusk is falling, that's a great time to go look and listen for owls. So maybe we'll have more information on tips for finding owls later this winter, because that's when they start setting up their territories, so they get very chatty. So it's a good time to find them. Let's see what else. Someone asked, do birds talk to each other? Definitely. All of the vocalizations they use, so vocalizations are noises they make with their mouth, sometimes with other body parts. Any sound they make, they're trying to talk to other birds, usually of their same species, but sometimes other species. And they can also communicate using their body posture. You know, if you think about humans, we can do something like this and say that we're mad, or we can do something like this and say that we're happy. Birds can do the same thing with their feathers and the way they hold their body. So birds do a lot of communicating with each other, definitely. Someone says they found the great horned owls in Middleton and they saw the babies grow up. Excellent. And Rowan's sparkbird is a robin and Finley says a macaw. Very cool. Elliot says his sparkbird is a crane. Cool. Or she. Elliot could go both ways. Chickadees and nuthatches for sparkbirds. Excellent. Cool. Oh, and someone else says they have barred owls just underneath the bluffs on the west side of Hoyt Park, nesting in the pine trees. Very cool. And a Sandhill Crane is a spark bird. They're in the pond behind her home. Excellent. Lots of spark birds. Beautiful. All right, so as far as this week goes, what are we excited about? I'm really excited about the bird scavenger hunts. So I also love to nature journal. And this is the nature journal I made with my son. I'm doing summer camp with him. He is 3 years old. So your nature journal probably looks a little different than the one we made. But I drew some pictures. I wrote Summer Camp 2020, and he added all of this lovely brown. But during the first round of summer camp, I just made little scavenger hunts for him like this. And again, if you're an older kid, you probably have a lot more detail going into your journal, maybe, dates and what you see, what you feel, what you hear. But for this one, it was a scavenger hunt that was a bird with black on it, a bird with red on it, a bird with yellow, and a bird with blue. So I just drew a bunch of birds and he colored them in, and we put little check boxes. I had to draw extra check boxes because it turns out if you color over them with crayon, you can't write on them with pen. But this is what his nature journal looks like. I love nature journaling, and there's so many different ways you can do it. I'm going to add a comment or a link in the comments to our tips for nature journaling page. But this is my nature journal, and I do something called a perpetual phenology journal. So each of these pages is 1 week in the year. And every year I go through and I draw a new picture. So this was 2017, 2018, 2019, and it looks like I skipped this year. But this is a really fun way to get outside and draw every week and also not have a whole lot of pressure on yourself, to write a lot or draw a ton. So there are so many different ways you can nature journal. Oh, and Brenna, she is watching this right now. She's our communications director. She put a link there for doing your own nature journaling, and there are so many different options there. So click that link if you need help getting started with nature journaling. Okay, so this week I'm excited to get back into nature journaling with my kiddo. The bird scavenger hunts are going to be great. I'm excited about point counts because not only do you get to watch birds and listen for birds, but you get to write it down like a scientist, and I love doing that. And depending on how old your kid is, you can adjust that lesson to make it more complicated and a little bit more challenging, or really easy. Sometimes when I'm out with little kids, I just have them point whenever they see or hear a bird, and they just point at where the bird is, and it helps them get good at figuring out where a bird is singing from. And finally, I love Build-A-Bird because I think it's so much fun to imagine your own bird and try to think about what its adaptations are and why it needs them. And it's a really great lesson for kids of all ages because their bird will grow depending on where they're at on their bird journey. Awesome. And grown-ups, you can do Build-A-Bird too. It's really fun. When I do this lesson with teachers in classrooms, the teachers have a lot of fun doing their own Build-A-Bird. Okay, so everybody, have fun this week. Enjoy Bird Week. Send us pictures, send us questions, and remember, our programming is free because we think everybody should have access to nature and everybody should be able to do fun, creative, cool things outside because nature relaxes us, it grounds us, it connects us to other people and the natural world, and it's really important. And we know that not everybody has equal access to nature. So if you love these lessons, I'm so excited. Share them with friends. And if you feel that you love them and you have the means to support us, we're going to add a link in the comments where you can go and make a donation. And if not, this will still always be here for you because nature should be for everyone. So, and everyone who joined me today, thank you. And I will see you maybe tomorrow at our bird feathers lesson and maybe next week when we kick off mammals because mammals are marvelous. Okay, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good day.